Welcome to the Young Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alison. If you're all about comfort zones and the status quo, this isn't your show. Each episode shares untold stories from disruptive leaders and innovators who challenge norms, drive business transformation, and lead with unapologetic purpose. And don't miss the N-word effect. 3 defining words that shape their leadership evolution. What if the most powerful chapter of your life hasn't even started yet? Today's guest is Cathy Derksen, the visionary founder of Inspired Tenacity, an international speaker, publisher, and best-selling author. After reinventing her life in her mid-50s, Cathy discovered a powerful mission to help midlife women unravel the stories that hold them back, unlearn limiting beliefs, and claim the confidence to become truly unstoppable. Through her multi-author book projects, transformational retreats, and a vibrant global community, Cathy has helped over 200 women become published authors, expanding their visibility and legacy. She lives by the mantra, chin up and keep moving, and brings spark, purpose, and energy into everything she creates. So let's get started, because this chapter begins right now. Thanks for joining us at another episode of the Young Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alison, and today I am very excited to welcome Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity. Cathy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited for our chat.
Yeah, me too. Well, as I mentioned to you, I like to start out each of my podcasts with a segment called the N-word effect. And that I know you were like, all right, this is going to be great. I cannot wait to go through this journey. But what the N-word effect is, I have each of my guests intentionally think of 3 words with the prefix of "un." And I'm really am interested to know from you, Cathy, what was your journey like when I asked you to go through the N-word effect?
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting because I would definitely say that onwards, that's a focus that I don't think I've ever met anyone else who has particularly focused on that. But
Thank
it
you.
made me, yeah, but
I
it
can
really
take that
did.
as a compliment, right?
Yes, oh, definitely. But it just made me realize how kind of unconventional my whole life really has been, since my mid 40s. I kind of like to say that, up to that point, I really was living just that, living in that box that they told us we're supposed to live in of,
Sure.
you finish high school, you go to university, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids, you get a dog, and then life just goes on. But it really was in my mid 40s when that whole thing started shifting for me. And really everything I've done since then is so on everything.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that's how you and I really resonated. It was funny because you and I met on an unrelated uh
Another onward.
opportunity, yeah, and it was so great, and you and I so appreciate uh guests like you saying, I would love to be on your podcast, and I sent you the information, and it really spoke to you, and it spoke to you on so many levels, and I was appreciative of your time again when you and I met to just kind of talk about your journey and your unconventional journey on what that really was like for you, and it was very profound to me, and I look forward to us diving more into, because it really was profound, and I appreciate here in just a few moments, and maybe through your unwords you'll kind of touch on some of those vulnerable moments that you went through in your life. uh, is there a particular word you want to start with, or did you want to just dive into Unravel?
Let's just dive in because that was where I was going to start.
Oh, perfect. Let's talk about Unravel. What was that journey and experience? Because I think that was a pretty big word for you, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. No, I love that word. And, I've noticed a few people have been starting to use it more. But to me, it really took me back to, like I mentioned, my mid 40s when everything changed. And part of that, I'd been living in a very toxic marriage. I was working in
Mm.
a very negative workplace. And so, really just kind of surviving day to day of a constant bombardment of just negative stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
And it really took, my family was involved in a fatal car accident.
Mm. So sorry.
Luckily, my family were physically fine. Obviously, it's very traumatic, and still to this day is very an emotional thing. But it really was that event that I give credit to, just giving me that slap upside the head of, what are you
Wow.
doing? Like, for one thing, is this the life you want to be living? And the other side that I think really hit me the hardest was, is this the example you want to be for your kids?
Well,
You
can
know,
I ask you a question in that moment? Because you just started right there with me, which is really kind of you, because all of us have had, or most of us have had something uh traumatic in some way that felt traumatic to us, and that's all that matters, is that it felt
yes.
traumatic to
Yeah.
us and nobody else. Can you talk about a little bit in this moment of what you needed to do, or what you were sort of, maybe your inner talk you were sort of telling yourself to decided this pivotal moment what direction you were gonna go down?
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, a big part of it was that part with my family,
Hmm.
and recognizing that, living in an abusive situation, it wasn't just me that was suffering in that
Sure.
environment. My kids were dealing with it as well. And so it was both that feeling of, I have to get them out of this situation, but
Hmm.
also, like I said, that role model thing about, is this the example of a family, of a relationship, of a marriage, of a grown up that I want my kids to have? And I think that was really the part of it that hit me the hardest. So the recognizing that my workplace was also extremely toxic was kind of the next phase of it. But I
Wow.
would say it was really that part of, I like, it's the mama bear. I am the mama bear, and it woke up that mama bear out of hibernation of, okay, claws out, shoulders up, we're doing
Yeah.
something now. And it was really that feeling of, it's me. I have to be the one to protect my kids, to shift my life, and knowing that it was going to be not easy. And that was even before I decided that I was changing my career at the same time as leaving the marriage, taking that they were teenagers at the time. Just, I describe it like I threw my life up in the air and reinvented it on the way back down. So left the
Wow.
marriage, left the career, left the starting everything from scratch.
That is that's I I I could feel kind of that pain area that you were with. And the reason why I can say that is I launched another podcast just recently, and her area was around betrayal. But you said a very key word, about survival. And sometimes when we're surviving, we can either go down another negative path, or we can survive and kind of go into that mama bear mode that you were talking about. And I just have to commend you, which even testaments more of why I was so interested in talking with you, and especially about being an unconventional leader, because as your world is unraveling, you're having to survive and uh, still show up in the world, as well as to show up for your children.
Yes.
So I can see why that unword, and we're going to probably talk about how you were able to go from uh, taking that unraveling to doing such amazing work that your company is doing today. So, which then I would kind of think really then moves nicely into your next word, which is unstoppable.
Yes, which really was a mindset that I had to just take on. And in the first book that I was involved in, one of my chapter really focuses on that whole time in my life and how I got through all this. And I mention in that I had almost like a mantra, that it was literally words that I would say to myself, sometimes out loud, sometimes in my head, just sometimes it was just, but it was chin up, keep moving.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I have talked to other leaders where there's something that they do very similar. I talked to another leader where she listens to the song Unstoppable by Sia. And that is what gets her, motivated and pumped and on with her day. And there are certain things that I do, and even before this podcast, uh, that I kind of do or say to myself that really sort of gets me focused and excited. And I think in your situation that you just talked with kind of this journey and unravel to being unstoppable is not letting all this other negative experiences that you we're dealing with your job, and then of course with this abusive situation that you were in, and that I just have to commend you with that inner strength, because that being able um, to really have the strength to do something as you did really does. And I definitely wanted to say that because that is not an easy experience
So,
you went through at all. So between these two words, is let me ask you this: is this a kind of a good time to sort of go into your journey of both of those experiences, and how you then started Inspired Tenacity? Does that fit in with the unlearn? Because I don't want us to move
yes,
to your
yes.
last word
They all
before.
fit together and intertwine a lot.
Okay. So did you want to go into unlearned, or would you like to kind of go, because you were in a very conservative work industry, and I definitely want our viewers and listeners to kind of get an idea, because someone is going to be listening or seeing and going, you know what? I have been in a very traditional work environment, and I have wanted to jump into entrepreneurship, or I want to be a founder of a company, or something. So I want to make sure that we kind of focus on that part of your
Yes.
journey. Is this a good place to do that?
Yeah. I think I'll kind of start from that point and give a bit more of, what happened and how those few years unfolded. And then that will kind of bring in all three of the unwords
That's perfect. Yes, let's do
from
that. That'd
there.
be great.
So yeah, so as you're saying, so my original career was actually in medical genetics. So I worked for 25 years, mainly hospital labs, public education, and that's what I was doing at this time when I realized I needed to change a lot of big things in my life. And I'll always love the field of biology and genetics. I love to say I've been a biologist since the age of 3. Ever
Wow.
since I was old enough to make decisions on what I was interested in, it was living things. And but the workplace itself, like I said, was very negative and going nowhere. And so in the middle of that whole divorce and everything I was in, I knew I had to make these decisions. Can I see myself doing this full time for the next 20 years? And literally, when I asked myself that question, my gut would just
Mm,
say, no, get
mm.
out. And
Yeah.
that's one thing too that I've really learned to
Mhm.
trust and listen to my intuition through this whole journey.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
fantastic.
And that's really what set me on this thing of figuring out, okay, what am I here for? What's, if it's not working day to day to day to day to, just doing life, what am I here for? And
Cathy, let me ask you a question, if you
yeah,
don't mind, about this particular. There are so many people. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many people, and I work with profit companies, nonprofit companies. I work with boards, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, Um, and I really help companies really focus on their employees. I mean, that is truly the backbone of a company. It in your situation, when we talk about toxic, and I believe there are toxic, and I have had to not to I've had to tell clients I cannot take them on until this part gets fixed, because this is a huge part of why you're not getting the growth or the success that you're hoping to achieve. But let's just take you as the individual for a moment here. uh, you're in this position. This isn't for me to get into what specifically was necessarily toxic. This is to help someone who feels they're in a toxic, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is strength, that either A, you can leave this company and feel confident and maybe find another job in the same field, that you don't have to live in, because toxic environments equal abusive, a level of abusive relationship. What is sort of what did you do specifically uh to one, tell yourself it was okay to get out, and what specifically, if you could share, that you did uh in order to jump into the journey that you are in today?
I think part of what gave me that ability to make these big changes was when I was a kid, we moved a lot.
Mm.
So many times through my childhood, I'd had to start over. And so I think just it's almost like an inner trusting that I can start over. And
Gotcha.
just
Yes.
knowing that that basic skill of starting again, starting from nothing, that I knew that scenario well. And looking back on it, I think at the time I didn't feel like I had any choices besides leaving. The dynamics was, it was a relatively small, as you can imagine, working in medical genetics, it's very specialized. So not
Sure.
a lot of different workplaces to go, not a lot of people in that field. So it was one person at the top, and then those of us underneath her that were, working under her. And it really was that top person who was the problem.
Wow.
The rest of us could have worked very
Hmm.
well together, but she
Hmm.
literally made a point of squashing people, making people know that they were not going to be promoted, that there was nowhere to go, that don't ask questions, to sit down, shut up, and do your work. And,
Wow.
so it was just very
Mm.
like, looking back on it, it made no sense at all given the field we were in, where really you should be encouraging people to learn more, to get out there, to
Sure.
it was such a field who's changing all the time. But yeah, it really was her own confidence, I guess, in working with other people. And so it really just was that, being under the finger, being squashed by,
Yeah,
so
it's so sadly common that I
yeah,
hear these
yeah,
stories so much, Cathy. And
yeah.
this is why I'm very thankful for you to share it, because it will this is such common practice, and I don't
Mm,
understand
yeah.
it
Yeah.
myself either.
Given the situation, I think even if I had spoken up and tried to make some changes or something, I'm sure it would have just backlashed at me, and it
Sure.
wouldn't have changed the situation. So leaving in that case, I think was my only. And I talked to some people now who are still working there that I used to work with, and it just kills me to see the look on their face and to know
Mm,
like that they have been living under this whole time. But so I think part of it was just knowing I just have to get out of here for my own,
sure.
like I could literally feel the both mental health and physical health that were being damaged by being in this environment. So it was really,
Absolutely.
I knew I had to get out of there.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I really speak a lot about uh going understanding your gut, and also paying attention to the things that are happening to you mentally and physically. This is not just something that happens in families. This also happens in the workplace, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
something that needs to be talked about more, which is why thank you for sharing that part of your journey as part of which definitely makes you unconventional. That you're like, I am not going to put up with that anymore. So after that experience, um, uh, uh, and what was it like for you to go, okay, I'm now going to start something of my own? What was that experience like?
Mhm. Well, before I made that move,
Sure.
in that personal reflection of figuring out what it was that I was supposed to be doing next, the part that was clear to me was that I needed to be doing something that was more in direct contact with people, and especially with women. And I
Ah,
had this
beautiful.
vision that I was to be doing something that would have a true impact in the lives of women around the world.
Love it.
So I had this vision, but I had no idea what that was.
Right.
And and at that time, again, you're just kind of going on what you know.
Yes.
I went into financial planning, thinking because so
Yes.
many women,
Yes.
they say that money and finance are things they're challenged by. We know it's a very male dominated area. So I thought, okay, I'll be that woman that can be in there, help change these other women's lives through their understanding with money. And I did that for about 10 years. So I had my CFP, worked at the big investment companies and banks, but it
Cathy, do
really,
you mind me asking this question? Did you get into more financial planning? Was that something because of um, uh, your family situation? And did you learn about that this was something important through your own personal experience that you wanted to now go down this path to help other women?
well, I think part of it was that, I'd always been comfortable with money.
Hmm.
Math was something I was fine with. And so I think that was part of it. But I think it
Hmm.
really was also that, that vision of doing something that would help women change their life.
Well, that's great.
And
That's
and
great.
that, what would be something that I could do that through.
Sure.
And yeah, and then after a decade realized that, just given the restrictions of that industry, and especially working with the big banks and investment companies, you're even more confined about what you can talk about, how you present yourself, what are the themes of. And to me, really the thing that really impacts our success with anything really is our mindset around it. So with most of the finance industry, all you can really talk about is, this kind of plan, this kind of investment, this kind of, so it's more information. But I think
Right.
we would all agree that lack of information is not what gets in the way of people's success with money.
Yeah.
It's their family history with money, it's their mindset around money, it's their stories with money. And those were
Absolutely.
all things I could not talk about. Those were not part
Wow.
of the conversation given where I was. And I thought, well, I'm not going to have this impact I want to be having if I can't even talk about the things that are really behind the success. And
Absolutely.
so that was kind of where I was at when I realized, okay, working in this field is not the answer. Still having that vision, okay, I'm going to do something that's creating a true impact in the lives of women around the world. So sticking with that. and, and that's when I left and decided to start my own company, Inspired Tenacity. And even then it was like, okay, I've still got this vision, I've still got this plan, but how, like, what is it? And
Yeah,
so
let me ask you about that part too. So you've worked uh, for companies, right? You're getting a constant paycheck, commissions, whatever the arrangement is. And then you go into the simple world of entrepreneurship. And
very
I say
simple,
that
yes.
I said that very sarcastically. I've always been an entrepreneur, so there's some sort of excitement and drive, but the stress and all that comes with it that I still love for, and I love helping other people uh, uh, figure that out for themselves and realize this can be a really wonderful place to be. What was that journey like for you? So because now you're like, all right, now this is me. And now I want to build something still within the vision, which you were very clear on what that vision was like. There are many people that are in this moment today that you were in. So what specifically uh what was it specifically you were kind of going through? Like you were like, okay, now I'm going to start this business. How did you go about that?
Yes, yes. And it was, and part of the complication in my case was, as a certified financial planner, I could not represent myself as anything else. So I couldn't
I
start a
see.
side hustle while I was
I
still
see.
working my job. I literally had to just leave. Which, yes, I definitely recommend
Hmm.
anyone who's considering leaving their job to start a business, if possible, to get the wheels turning before you leave your job so that you're, overlapping. Whereas, like I said, in my case, I didn't have that option. It was, I could not just be seen as presenting myself or speaking on anything else other than the who I represented and what my career was. And so that was
And
definitely
Kathy, let me ask you this moment. Does what you just said, and along with my questions, does that sort of go in with your third unword of unlearn?
well, it kind of comes in as, as I got going with my business and really
Hmm.
reflected on who, like women, yes, but who
Hmm.
exactly am I here to serve? And I really did narrow in on midlife women. I would say like 45 to 80 is what I consider
Hmm.
midlife.
Hmm.
And part of that, just seeing how so many of us, whether we're in jobs or in other situations, we're just feeling completely stuck with, what am I supposed to be doing next?
Yes.
Part of that
Yes.
is that old model of retirement where we're basically told, you work to 65, then you just quit. And
Yep.
then you
Yep.
basically
Yep.
wait to die. Whereas now we have to live, we have to plan to live into our 90s or hundreds now. So even if you work right to 65, you got potentially another 30 years, which hopefully will be good, productive, happy, relatively healthy years.
Of
And
course. Of
so
course.
I would say in our time now, we have to plan something else we're going to do later. So a big part of my focus really did become on midlife women, with this idea of, we have to figure out what we want to do with the rest of our life. We've been told in our culture that after the age of 50, women are old and obsolete and no one needs
Yep.
us, and we just go sit in the corner and be quiet.
Hmm.
And again,
Hmm.
we're not doing that for another, 30 years of our life. And and I think in so many cases, we've spent decades looking after everybody else, doing what we're supposed to do. We've got to the point where we haven't even thought about what we want, what's next for us. Probably been decades for most women before, since they've actually thought about what they want.
I can absolutely relate to so much of what you're saying because I feel, and I spoke about this on a few other podcasts that I've been on, where I just now feel like in my early 50s, I'm just getting started. I've had I had a previous successful business, which you and I talked about in regards to when COVID. And I was like everybody else. And I asked myself a very similar question. If everything became normal over the next 2 weeks, would I really, and while we were in kind of a lockdown, would I really truly love doing what it is I'm doing today? And I did love it. But did I find that really inner core and passion that I loved doing? My answer was no.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for my business opportunities, very grateful for my clients, happy for the success stories, learn from the not very success stories. But, I had to say that when I was kind of given a strange gift during COVID to really think about that, and I really do. I feel that I'm just getting started, and the energy behind with what I'm getting started.
Exactly.
So I can
Exactly.
totally, absolutely relate to what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you bringing it up.
Well, and you think too, if we are going to live into our 90s or hundreds, we know that to do that well, we need to be socially stimulated, mentally stimulated, physically active. We need to feel like there's a reason why we got out of bed in the morning. And puttering is not a reason to get out of bed. So, and I
Yep,
think, as women, we have so much wisdom and experience and passion that we've just been, building over decades. Why not use that? And, for some people, they're financially set, they don't need a job or a business, then pick a volunteer activity, pick
sure,
something that makes you excited to do something. And for those,
absolutely.
and to have a business, even if it's a small business, it gives you that. It gives you that, you're always learning something new. You're mixing with new people. You're thinking of new ideas. And that's what's going to keep us happy and healthy all these new decades. And
Yeah.
so midlife women really became my passion
Mm.
of, who am I here to serve? And so really all three of my unwords, so my unraveling, my unstoppable, and my unlearning,
Mm-hmm.
really is all tied into these midlife women. Because even just looking at what I've come through and what I think many of us need to do is an unraveling of those stories, those expectations, that little box we put ourselves in.
Love
But
it.
the
Mm-hmm.
unlearning to me is huge. Unlearning that message that we're old and obsolete, unlearning that message that, our bodies are getting old and we might as well just not plan to do anything. Unlearning that idea that, well, I spent 30 years in this career, I can't do something new at 60.
Yep.
I started as a financial planner at 47. I started my business at 57.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, I'm 61 and I am just getting started. I
Just
have
getting started.
so many things I am doing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I love that you were very clear. I think it's very important when you're wanting to start a company that you're very clear on what you want to serve and who you want to serve. I think that is really crucial uh, in being clear before you even get started. And what
Well,
I mean by that is I'm not saying that you need to have it all figured out, because then you lose all the fun stuff that comes with it.
that's right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it that you need to have it all figured out before getting started. But I think with you figuring out those two components just drew this passion within you
Yeah.
to know that this is what you truly want to do, is what I mean by that.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Exactly. And that whole idea of being open to new things. Like what I'm doing now, as you know, the main thing I'm doing is creating multi author books.
Yes.
If you had asked me 5 years ago if this was the path I was on and this was my big dream, I would have laughed at you because there was nothing, absolutely nothing in my past that would have suggested that I was going to become an author and publishing would be my main focus. Nothing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, I think now I truly, you've told me this before, but I would like for you to also let our listeners and viewers in on this. I now truly feel what inspired tenacity, your company name. It fits so beautifully. How is through the journey, is that how you came up with really a perfect name for your company?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I give my intuition credit for the name as well. And it was really in that time of rethinking and resorting. What am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing? That inspired tenacity came to me, and to me, it represents two of the big factors we need to make any kind of big change in life: that inspiration to do something, but then that tenacity to keep at it till we get there. And I always say that the word courage belongs in the middle. because without courage, none of this happens either.
Yes,
But
yes.
and I was telling you too that, the name of my company has really become a filtering system, because when I first came out with my business and I told people this was the name, I had several people tell me, well, that's stupid. It doesn't mean anything. You can't name your company that. And I almost changed it.
Ah,
And then I started meeting people like you who said, I
mhm.
love it. It's perfect. I get it. And so I realized that the name has become, people either get it or they don't get it. And
Yeah.
that's fine. And some do, some don't. That's fine. But yeah, I've had so many people who get it instantly and
You know,
love
I think that's so important. And when you told me that story, I thought it was really great, because I already got to a point in my career where I just didn't care anymore. I was like, this name just really fits. Unconvention fits. It fits me. I have always told me I'm unconventional. They've always told me I don't fit in a box. Um, so doing a job that worked with people seemed very like, yeah, that's really
it.
kind of a no-brainer. uh but I think you bring up a really good point, because there's some old school thinking when you're starting a business, right, where run your name by people, and if a majority of people really get it, then you have a good name. And I think your testimony right now
Mm.
doesn't mean that that's necessarily true, because when I say unconvention, it automatically brings up, well, what is that? So it already invites someone to ask a question. So I like not having something within my name that just explains everything that I do, because
That's
then where's
true.
the fun in
Yeah.
explaining it?
It's a
And
curiosity.
yeah, and then having a name where I can just have all kinds of things within my company. So it's so broad that makes it wonderful. And I think that goes so well with the name of your company too. And I think it's a testament saying sometimes if the majority of people don't have to get it, and that doesn't mean it's bad. That means it could be really great. So I think when people really thinking about that name and the traditional way of saying, hey, let me go run this by a bunch of people, and the majority is gonna overrule, be careful about that, because you could be really
Yes,
taking,
yes.
where you, like you said, I almost gave up the name if I listened to all those people. So I love that.
And yeah, and it's really, like I said, with midlife women really being the focus of all of my work, that that inspiration and tenacity is what will change our lives. And letting ourselves, one of the things I always love to remind people of as well, as chances are your immediate family and friends are not going to be your biggest supporters if you try changing things in midlife. If you decide you want to start a business, if you want
Yes.
to decide you want to travel more, if you decide, like, your family and friends, I mean, most of them are just acting to protect you. They are just feeling like, oh, she's gone off the deep end. but
Yes.
but these days we have access to the world as far as community goes. So, when you do have those ideas and you think, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, I don't lean on your immediate family and friends if they're not supportive. Obviously, if they are supportive, then
Yeah,
great.
great.
But
You're one of the lucky ones.
yes, yeah, exactly. But know that you are surrounded by communities and opportunities to connect with people that even if they're not doing the same thing you're doing, but they're doing other crazy things or other brand new things, that just having that community around you who's encouraging you to follow your passion, to follow what you're interested in, and just like bring that community together. And that, to me, community has been probably one of the major things that's really kept me moving forward,
Yeah,
and
me too. I
creating that
agree.
comfort.
I agree. I agree. And I mean, you and I have had more talks together, and I feel that you're one of my support systems, and you and I are looking to see how we might be able to collaborate, and you really show. Uh, you practice what you preach in regards to showing how you want to support women. If it may not be with you directly, then you want to guide them and making sure that they are being supported in some way. Let's talk about you know at the time that you wanted to do this business and you wanted to be a collaborative author. And it was, and your story kind of reminds me. I never went to podcasting school. I wanted to do this, and I just remember people telling me, okay, well, just go for some low expectations on who you might be able to get on your show. And I'm like, well, that's not very supportive because I have very
No.
high expectations on who I want to have on this show because I'm that level of person. Uh, so, what was it like for you being not an author, really, or were you an author at the time, and getting people to, let's say, be your early adopters in doing a collaborative book? What was that like? Because I did something where I couldn't show someone a podcast at the time. I could just say, well, this is what I do. But I didn't have a product yet. So I needed people to believe in my mission for this podcast, what I wanted to do, the people I want to showcase on this podcast. What was that experience for you going, I don't have a book, but I want to
Yeah.
do this. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting because how I started this journey. So 2019 was when I was in the first book that I was just one of the authors contributing to somebody else's book.
I see. So you had some experience in that.
And
Okay.
and that's what got me started and at that time though, it was a local group here that was doing some books. I'd been aware they had been doing books for the last couple of years. I didn't feel anything about that's something I should do until one came along, and it was called Emotional Intelligence, Mental Health Matters. And
Ooh.
that was after I had been through that divorce, complete career change, moved my whole family twice. And I felt that my story was one that would help other women.
For
So at that
sure.
time, I was still working at the bank. I actually had to get permission to participate in something like this. But my only
Mm-hmm.
goal was that I felt my story would help somebody else. I wasn't promoting anything. Again, I had no plan of doing more. I wasn't planning on doing this, carrying on with that. It was just that it was almost like a calling, this message in me saying, no, your story needs to be in that book now. And I couldn't
Mm.
say no. It was a very weird experience, but just being in that where you're sharing your story, you're putting it on paper, there's almost a therapeutic part of
Oh, sure.
putting your story on paper and releasing it out into the world.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
especially doing that with a group of people, because there's that, again, that community feeling that we're doing this together. And you meet people, you get to know people. It's a whole different kind of connection. But after I did the first one and really, again, felt that, wow, I really loved that experience. Next thing I knew, I had done 3 books with that same group.
Wow.
And then I started getting invited into other people's books and other speaking opportunities, and other things just sort of started coming to me. So by the time I started my business, I had already been in, I think, at least 5 or 6 books. And again,
Wow.
they were all other people's
And
books.
these were all other people's collaborative
Yes, they're all
books.
anthologies,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
7 of those so far are my projects, but all the rest are other people's books. So far I've worked with over a dozen different publishing groups, shared my stories on many different themes and topics and perspectives. And so when I decided that I wanted to really focus on this, I'd come to that realization that, going back to my mission around creating something that really was a true impact in the lives of women, I thought, these stories and putting my stories in these books is a great impact. I get a lot of value out of it. And I realized that it's something that I wanted to make available and accessible to more women. I think they say that 92% of people have it on their bucket list that they want to become a published author, but only
Sure.
about 5% of people ever do.
Sure.
And knowing that, especially as women, I think stories are really what bring us together in community. And I find that they help to inspire and motivate and shift, and just knowing what others are doing or how they got through things helps the reader to come through things themselves. So that really kind of became the focus of why I felt so strongly that this was now something I was supposed to be doing, was
Wow.
making that opportunity available to others. So when I first started, I was actually at I think my 7th and 8th book were the ones that I was in the middle of. And there was one publishing group that I loved working with. Like I said, I've been 12 different groups now. There's one that I just love the most, and still, with all the books I've done, love the most. And so I proposed a collaboration with them
Mm-hmm.
and said, well, I'll do the front end. So I'll create my own themes and titles. I'll bring together my people. I'll work with them getting chapters ready. And then we bring the whole thing over to them.
Oh, beautiful.
And so we've been doing that now for, I guess, about 3 years. And like I said, so we've published 6 books together, and we've got many, many more. Hopefully I've got 4 or 5 that should be out by the end of the year. So many others coming along, but it really was that collaboration that made it doable for me. Because
I think, go ahead. I'm sorry. Please go
I
ahead.
was just going to say that I'm not
No.
interested in learning all the intricate details of how to publish, how to edit, how to get on Amazon, how to create all the marketing. That's not my passion. My passion is the front end, where I bring women, mainly women. I've got a few books that have some guys in them, but bringing people together in a way that they're creating community, where they're sharing their stories, where we're really creating a ripple effect of impact with what we're doing. That's the part that I'm excited about.
Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful relationship that you have with uh, the publishing companies that you work with, because there are so many people, and even myself at the time, I was thinking, oh, I'd love to do a book. And then, but a solo book to somebody could seem very daunting. It to get a book out and to launch a solo book can also be very expensive.
Yes.
And so when you look at those aspects of it, and I didn't know much about collaborative books really until I met you, and I was very appreciative, one of you, one bringing the concept to me, one to partake in a book with you, but then you also being very engaged with my branding and what I'm wanting to do within my podcast and my business, and so I was like, wow, that was like a really big light bulb uh, for me. It really was, and I'm very grateful for you to you for that. But I was just thinking too, I love the community aspect of it. I think that's really important. But two, as entrepreneurs and founders who want to share their stories, and you think about what a marketing, you have your marketing budget as a company, and so you think about, oh, I want to put money here, I'm put money there, this is where my networking budget is going to be, and it really is a non-threatening point of entry, really, to be an author, and to look at
Yes.
it that you are wanting to put whatever the dollar amount is to go in and participate in an opportunity like this. It really does make being an author a bit more tangible
Yes. Yes.
to people who feel the whole daunting task of, of a book, and where am I going to find the time to be able to do something like that. But I also love your purpose of community. I think that's really important, because I think women in particular are finding ways and where they can put their money into in supporting other women. And I think your projects do that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I would agree. And you know what? That's something I did very naturally. of making sure that all the authors in my books have contact with each other and that we do things together. And it wasn't until actually quite recently that I've realized that a lot of other people that do similar books don't do that part. That
Wow.
the authors in the group don't really have any contact with each other unless they make a point of finding each other.
I think that's a missed opportunity. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to know that that is something that, yes, you want to produce a really great product, of course. You want to have really amazing, let's just say, part of this conversation, women part of, if it's a more of a women topic focused group, but also making sure that those relationships are built, also around the book,
Yeah.
and that people can communicate with each other, because
Yeah.
to me, I think it only enhances the
Oh,
the
exactly.
product for
Exactly.
sure. It
Looking for the
enhances.
collaborations and the friendships and the communications. Some of my books, so when the book is finished and launched, I don't close those group chats.
That's
And
wonderful.
and my books that launched 2 years ago, the women are still communicating and connecting inside those chats. If somebody won an award, someone's looking for a job, someone's just got something, hey,
Right.
can you help promote this post I put out? So they're still in there communicating and connecting with each other. And yet, to me, so much of it is around what comes out of the book. And the collaborations inside the community, I think, are a huge part of that. And even when we look at launch time, when like we hit international #1 bestseller with all of our books through the Amazon system. But part of that is being able to, on social media, be liking and sharing and communicating with each other. So
Absolutely.
now you've got, like my books, I focused on having 20 people. So now you've got 20 communities around the world who are all promoting the same thing and
Beautiful.
intertwining each other. Like that's where the energy comes from, is that interconnection between those communities. And so yeah, it's really hit home for me in the last few months of that I how I do that part of it is unique. And to
I
me is one of the most valuable parts of the whole experience.
I totally agree with you. And I'm glad you shared that, because that is one of the things where I get a little sad after I'm done doing a podcast, which I probably will be after this one
Oh,
too.
we'll
Just
talk again.
because, oh, I know we will for sure. But that's the thing for me, is building this community. To me, when I reach out to someone or they reach out to me and they want to be part of the podcast, and it's something that collaborative, we feel we can put something really great together. Um, to me, that's not the end. That's only the beginning,
Yeah.
because I got to learn so much about that person. And I love that your book is more than just a book. You are building a community around that book. And I also want to throw out this too, which I think is also really wonderful that you do with your books as well, as there. I don't know if all of them, but I know in the ones you've shared with me that there is a nonprofit component to it. And I think that is beautifully, beautifully done. So I love that your books are not just information, allowing these women to tell their stories, uh, and building a beautiful community for personal and business communications, but that there's also an even an additional meaningful part to those books. So I wanted to commend you for that as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
We're getting close to our wrap up time. I feel like I always put my guests on the hot seat for a bit. I do want to give them the opportunity to be able to ask me a question.
I wanted to ask you, and as you know, I love this unword theme. What
Thank you.
started that? Like, what was it? Was there a certain
Yeah.
moment you just realized I'm surrounded by unwords? Or like, where'd that come from?
No, gosh, not at all. That's what's a great. That's a great question. What started it for me is, when people ask you to describe yourself or talk about yourself, you say the same things. It's like the same, and that's fine to do that. But it wasn't until I met a dear friend of mine from France, and the in their language is used in a very positive way.
Oh.
And so, culturally speaking, is really how the came about. And I started she was helping me think of the name of my company. And I didn't know how much the was really going to be throughout my whole branding. But your question is how it really started. It started with speaking to her and her asking me really tough questions like, okay, well, if you couldn't say you're a doctor, you couldn't say you have a PhD, and you couldn't say, how would you describe yourself very differently to somebody? And I was stuck. I didn't know how to do that. I really was stuck. And so she was telling me about the prefix and what that really means. And so, of course, I Googled it like everyone else does to try to really think about that. And then I said, okay, if I was to describe myself in 3 words with the prefix on at the beginning, what would those be? And I came up with undeterred. I came up with unconventional, and I came up with unapologetic. And unconventional for me was just typical because people have always been like, you've always been that way. But what really was meaningful to me was that unapologetic. And I think it was because it was the journey that I was on, that I spoke about a little bit on this recent podcast that I launched. But the word unapologetic to someone could be like, they could take it very negatively, meaning, well, she doesn't say she's sorry. She doesn't care about people's feelings. Like, she's not a really good person. But unapologetic was mean that I was actually tired for apologizing for what I do and the great work that I do, or the kind of person that I am. I was tired of apologizing for that. And I didn't have a reason to do it really. And that was my own inner work, was to try to figure out, why do I keep apologizing? And so that's why the word unapologetic was so strong for me. And then undeterred was, I'm not going to let people continue to get in my way of what I want to do and achieve, both in my personal life, my professional, and all that comes with it. And I felt like if that was really resonating me, maybe that was resonating with other people in general, and then people just in their own professional, and maybe it even affects the people who have these most amazing, very successful jobs. Maybe they're feeling in a very similar way. And that's kind of how it all sort of started. And it's been really embracing to people. And that's how the Unword effect was born, and how I call it in not only my my company, but also the process that I do, that like you went through during this podcast. And so that's how that was sort of all born.
Perfect. No, I love that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you asked. And and I know it resonated with you because you said we need to do some book series around this. So.
That's right. Get the people together.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Cathy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being on the show. I am greatly appreciative, and I'm very greatly appreciative for our professional connection and also our friendship that we have built. So, again, thank you very much. Thanks for streaming the Unconversations podcast. To help the Unword effect, subscribe, share, and step into the movement that's flipping the script. Catch the next episode where we unmute the truth and uncover the unexpected.